I knew it was my dad before anybody had said anything. I knew that he was gone.
Welcome to Zero. I'm Paul Martin. In this episode, we continue our exploration of the issues surrounding safety at home and in the workplace. Now, for farm families, the home and the workplace are one and the same. And in this edition, we will hear how one farm family was impacted by the loss of a loved one. We'll also look at how the Mission Zero message is a central theme in an initiative targeting young people, more particularly those associated with farming. Terry Larson was the Community Relations Coordinator with the Saskatchewan Safety Council. She came to that job through difficult circumstances. A few months after this self-described daddy's girl was married, the day before her wedding pictures were to arrive, tragedy struck the family that farmed in the Rollo district south of Regina. She'd gone to town to pick up groceries and quickly realized something was happening when the fire trucks began to roll.
I just had this gut, one of those gut. It's like, oh, what's happened? What I remember is all of these people that are my neighbors. Some of them were like parents to me, some of them like grandparents. I'm waving, because that's what you do. You wave when you greet people. And this steady stream of traffic coming back, nobody'd wave. And I remember that so vividly. By the time we hit the top of the hill, so halfway out to the farm, I could see the lights of the fire truck. They were turning people away at the end of our yard. And I quit trying to wave to the neighbors because I knew something had happened. Dad had been crushed by a sheet of steel working in his shop. Tough day, he was 54 years old. And I remember all of the things that they were at that stage in life where they were starting to talk about retirement, and they were starting to talk about the things they would do when they retired from the farm. With my brother farming with them, that allowed them that sort of to explore the idea of what they would do. And that was gone that day. Dad, I never had the time to show him my wedding photos, and that's the hard part, is in an instant, an entire family was changed.
The impact had a ripple effect, she says. She lost her father in the incident, but she wants others to know that no individual is an island.
I often say I lost both of them that day. I lost my mom and my dad because they had been grade 8 sweethearts and they had only ever been with each other. And the loss of him in her life to this day, 14 years later, it's so tangible. You see that pain to this day. And it's, that sort of thing changes a family forever. I guess as a daughter, how do you grieve? How do you work through your own pain when you feel obligated to be there to support your mom, right? To be there to support your kids. I was newly married and had this relationship as well to sort of navigate, and there was just so much pain, and that pain was months. A farm situation like a business, it's complicated waters to navigate. Who's going to do what? How does this impact the running of the farm?
The ripples continued after the funeral. The loss of her father played a role in her changing careers. She established a successful business in Lumsden. But when the landlord decided to sell the building she was in, she knew another change was in the works and stumbled onto an ad with the Saskatchewan Safety Council. So she applied.
When I interviewed that day, I had to do a presentation on what my thoughts on safety were. What did safety mean to me? And so I had an opportunity to share my dad's story and share After working in the government and working as the same classification as a Revenue Canada auditor, where people were a number, that was the job I was doing when my dad's accident occurred. And I very quickly left that position because I realized I couldn't do that anymore. People meant more than a number. And this was my opportunity to really have people mean more than a number.
She got that job and took the story of her family's loss and other farm injuries to young people. She took over a program started in southeast Saskatchewan that provided bursaries to students who took a safety course. But she amped it up and took it province-wide. The first pilot was at Southland Co-op in Assiniboia. Today, it's morphed into a couple of programs.
We've also got a curricula-fitted format, which sees us deliver early safety training or the safety training courses as part of their high school credit courses. So things like Energy and Mines 30, where they're learning all about energy and mines. They're also taking some other safety certificates or tickets, if you like. Then we'll come into their classroom during school hours and provide the roughly 30 hours of safety training. The other format that we do that's probably 70% of the training that we're doing is through a boot camp format. So we were working with Regina District Industry and Education Council. They have a group of students that will be doing summer apprenticeship placements. So these students will be earning high school credit in a paid position in their sort of chosen field, and those hours count toward their apprenticeship tickets when they ultimately apply for an apprenticeship program.
But it was her own personal experience that made her realize they needed a program aimed specifically at young people in the agricultural community. Today, the Safety Council offers an online program aimed at farm kids called OATS, an achievement that holds a special place in her heart.
The fact that we are able to offer that training free, again, ticks another box for me, because it is a roughly 3-hour introduction to the safety and the hazards that exist on most farms, and that is absolutely free for anyone that could take it. Primarily targeting young workers on the farm. But honestly, I think if I'd have said to my dad, oh, hey, there's this course, why don't you take it? I don't think he would have done it. Had my little guy seen it in the school and been introduced to it and went out to the farm and said, Papa, look at this course. Can we go and check your shop for hazards? Or can we go and check the truck for hazards? Or I think he would have done it. I think if he'd had a series of stickers that identified wrap hazards, pinch hazards, and crush hazards, he would have stickered all his equipment just as an activity to do with his grandkids. So as much as we say we're targeting young workers with OATS and young farm workers, really it's good information for absolutely everybody.
Larson's passion for her role as a champion of safety in all aspects of life is clear, but she's especially proud to see that this work is beginning to make a difference, that Saskatchewan's track record is improving.
I get excited when we hear things like Saskatchewan for years had the worst record for injuring youth. When I came to the council initially in 2013, we had the second worst record. And all of a sudden last year, there's this big jump, and now we're number 4. So when I talk to kids, I talk about that. I'll say, when is it better to be number 2 than number 1? Well, obviously, when we're talking about injuries, you don't want to be the province with the worst record. So every time there's new stats that are released, I get excited, and I'm proud to think that maybe I'm contributing in some small way to that. I think my dad would be incredibly proud. Incredibly proud. He was a VOCAG, so vocational agriculture. I've had the opportunity to connect with some of his past classmates, including George Lidster, who lost his arm in the Baylor accident, and they have said as much to me. They've said, honey, your dad would be so proud of you.
Terry Larson seemed to be the perfect match for her job at the Saskatchewan Safety Council. Her passion, it's never far from the surface. Now, losing someone close to you, that instant when they go from being a vital part of your life to nothing more than a memory obviously has a powerful impact. And her story reminds us how quickly that can happen. After this break, we'll learn more about the Safety Council, and stay with us as you'll hear how Terry has turned to the literary arts to keep the memory of her father alive.
Zero is usually a bad thing, right? Like when you're talking pocket money or a team score. But what if zero meant something else? What if zero was a good thing? What if the mission was zero? Zero injuries, zero fatalities, zero suffering. Make zero your mission. A message from Safe Saskatchewan.
For more than 6 decades, the Saskatchewan Safety Council has been the voice and agent of safety in all aspects of Saskatchewan life. It has a storied past, and for the past 4 years as CEO of this storied agency, Ryan Jacobson has occupied a very special chair at the Saskatchewan Safety Council. It's a seat with a lot of history. Back in 1956, the agency was officially opened by then Premier Tommy Douglas, who used that exact chair to stage the media event. For today's CEO, that piece of furniture ensures he's always in touch with the organization's roots.
And it stayed around the whole time then through the eras of we can't get rid of the chair, especially after the CBC article ran of choosing him as the greatest Canadian and saying, well, our greatest Canadian opened our office originally when we had our first office. So the chair is sort of a sentimental piece of our historical value and a visible reminder, I guess, of the history of our organization.
While trying to stay true to its roots, the organization now reaches all corners of the province and wide demographics, with a particular emphasis on educating young people on matters of safety, whether at work or at home, offering more than 60 different programs. One of the Safety Council's most recent additions is a program they call OATS, or Online Agricultural Training System.
It's our first online course that we've developed at the Saskatchewan Safety Council and is really meant as a general safety orientation for agriculture workers. So whether you're on the farm or on the ranch, whether you're going in as a summer student onto a farm or whether you've been a career farmer, there's a lot of information that when I was farming, I'd wish somebody would have told me. And with the general side of our farms, a lot of them are family businesses. They're growing quite rapidly now. Some are very large businesses, but still roots in the family side of that. And a lot of the information that we base our farms on and our risk management decisions, whether they're financial decisions, whether they're what crop rotations you want to do, or what safety you want to do, is based on what you've learned from your family over the years. And when we looked at that, there wasn't a lot of availability for outside educational sources that were widely available to farm families to say, well, what other information's out there? What other best practices are out there that maybe my family hasn't encountered, but somebody else has along the way? And that was really why we kickstarted that program, is to make sure that we remove the barriers out there to agriculture families.
The program, which takes about 3 hours to complete, was written with the help of linguists and educators to ensure it would be functional for young teenagers or older farmers. Also, it can be done at the user's own pace. Do a little, save the progress, and then come back later to continue through the course materials. OATS complements other programs, and one in particular aimed at individuals between the ages of 14 and 21, something of a primer for their entry into the working world.
Everything from supervisor training to things like ground disturbance or fall protection, motorcycle training, defensive driving training, babysitter training, first aid. We have a fairly wide spectrum of these types of things. Currently, we have large focuses on youth and seniors from our community outreach side. As small businesses, essentially, and many thousands of small businesses that make up a very large segment of that industry in Saskatchewan, there's barriers of affordability and accessibility to that training that it's not reasonable to have somebody drive into Regina, drive into Saskatoon to be able to take a course. And timing was always a bit of an issue, because at what point in the year were you available to go take a safety course versus fixing the combine or having calving season going on? It just didn't work that well. So we made the program purposely to be wildly accessible anywhere. Anywhere that you have a stable internet connection. It doesn't need high speed, it just needs a 3G connection, such as off a mobile phone. And then you can use that course when you have time. So you can work through it over a number of sittings. You can log in and out of the program. And we also wanted to make sure that it was accessible and affordable. Another way is that we made it completely free to the end users to use. So it's supported by sponsorship. We get sponsorship from various corporations that want to give back to the agriculture community. And through that sponsorship, we were able to make that program completely free to the province and all of Canada for that matter. It is the first of its kind. There's nowhere else that we could see when we started off on this project that had developed a similar system. There was a wide scoping injury prevention and safety orientation for agriculture. However, there was many of them in other industries. So there's similar systems in construction and oil and gas, mining. They all have similar general orientation systems, but nobody had ever done one for agriculture. With our history at Saskatchewan Safety Council, we've always had deep roots in agriculture. We've been working on farm safety and agriculture safety since the mid to late 50s, right after we were formed. And it really seemed the next step was to utilize the technology that's out there now, realizing that our access to internet in rural Saskatchewan is growing thanks to the expansion of mobile networks, and the accessibility and technology has progressed to the point where we can now get that information to the people that need it in a much more affordable way.
This particular program was initiated by some volunteers in southeast Saskatchewan who took it into the school system. Now, the Saskatchewan Safety Council has taken it province-wide. After this break, we'll meet the volunteers who made that happen.
Zero is usually a bad thing, right? Like when you're talking pocket money or a team score. But what if zero meant something else? What if zero was a good thing? What if the mission was zero? Zero injuries, zero fatalities, zero suffering. Make zero your mission. A message from Safe Saskatchewan.
Well, welcome back to the program. In this segment, we travel to southeast Saskatchewan. I'm going to talk with a couple of guys who have been involved with the issue of safety and safety in the workplace for quite a while, a couple of decades. Now, you know, there's a saying that failure is an orphan and success has many fathers. Well, today we're going to meet a couple of fathers of a successful program. Joining us are Wayne Irwin. He's retired, but in his working life was involved in the oil industry, and more particularly Sask Oil in the southeast part of the province. And Lyle Jacobson is with the Saskatchewan Heavy Construction Association. And they were the kind of thought process or the people that brought together the early program, and I brought them into studio here so we can have a talk about that. Gentlemen, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about this. You call it the early prevention program. You know, can you tell us where this started? I understand it all kind of began in a coffee shop back in like 1998, something like that?
Yeah, 89 actually, Paul, but when we started, Lyle and I got together, we both farm, and we were concerned with all the farming incidents, and so we both have children. We said, what can we do to help prevent others from being hurt? And so we got together, a number of us, and came up with some ideas on how we can do that together.
And so that just led you to, you know, sitting in the coffee shop and saying, how are we going to address this? Is that where it began?
That's basically how it began, and then of course, as with any program, you know, it takes a while to work out the fundamentals. But we went at it with the attitude we'd try and get some other people involved, which we did, and it turned out very well in our favor over a number of years. So,
I'm interested in the motivation that started this. This was less about yourselves, more about a fear, if I can use that word, or concern about the future for your children.
Well, that's correct. Both Lyle and myself have children, and we farm, and we knew the statistics. Both of us have always been interested not only in the training side, but the safety of people, and it doesn't matter what type of industry. And one of the things that we always said, it always seems the young people, they want to please you, and they don't know or have enough experience on how to ask the correct questions so they don't get hurt, as they want to please you.
Is there a little bit, too, of young people being sort of indestructible? You hear that talked about a lot. Did you see some of that, too?
maybe in a mild sense, but not a whole bunch. in most cases, the young worker will go out to try and please the employer, and they're assuming that the employer is looking after their welfare. And in the past, when we first started this, there was no way of them really getting that information, and that's what we tried to get across at the school levels and everything was, they do have rights and responsibilities, and we wanted to make them aware of that.
It's a good point, right to the school level, and there's a part of me that wants to talk to you a little bit about safety in agriculture, but this is much bigger than that, isn't it? This goes across all industrial, commercial activities, even at home, I guess, all activities that involve people putting themselves into situations where they have to think about what's my personal safety.
You're right on the money there. They're like the young people, like I say, they're very eager. They're trying to learn. They were very much under the impression, like I said earlier, that the employers would look after them. As we well know from statistics, that is not the case. And with the knowledge that they've learned, we feel, and again, this is something that's really hard to measure, if something doesn't happen, did you prevent it from happening, or was it a result of just luck? But we think that our program actually gave them a lot of awareness, and they were asking those important questions when they went into the workplace.
Well, let's go right back to basics. When you two sat down and you had a kind of a coffee conversation and you got this topic on the table, what did you envision as a way of delivering this education component to young people, and how has it evolved? So what were you thinking about in the beginning?
Our main goal, we thought at this time, if we could possibly get this into the schools so all children would be able to access this information, and it wasn't limited to any one industry, we felt that by them having this knowledge about working it, and it didn't matter what type of equipment, farming, agriculture, industry, that they would have some knowledge that they could ask the correct questions when they're going to work for these people. The other part of this, we went to a number of people in industries and got them involved in it as well. So as part of this program, it not only was the teaching of these students, I will call them students, and then working with the people that hire them as well. So when they come on board, they're prepared for these type of questions in this training. So it was a win-win on both sides. The people that are hiring the students and the people that are the students that are getting this work, they would come to the work site with some of these skills already in place.
It's an interesting component to this where you're saying to young people, effectively you're saying, I'm empowering you to ask questions, to challenge, to really raise this issue and giving them, if I could say this, the confidence to be able to say to a boss, what about this?
And that's exactly what we were trying to get across to them is basically, again, I had mentioned earlier, they do have rights and responsibilities, but also don't be afraid to ask the questions and don't be afraid to say no if they recognize a hazard that's there. And that is part of the training, is to have them be able to recognize hazards that may hurt them and try to take steps to get around it.
So who were the early adopters? Who did you convince that this was a good idea and they would let you into their school?
Well, there was another number of people, and one of the major ones that I'll mention, it was Morris Jago at the Estevan Comprehensive School. We talked to him as well as a number of companies that hired people throughout, not just the summer, but year round. And they came on board and supported this program. But like I said, Morris was one of the key people that helped us get this kicked off in the Estevan School.
Now, this thing's all province-wide. This started in the southeast, but it's gone province-wide, right?
Yes.
That's correct, yeah. And we successfully ran it until 2013, and then it was turned over to the Saskatchewan Safety Council in conjunction with WorkSafe Saskatchewan, and it's went to a provincial level now. So.
You know, I'm intrigued by one aspect of this, guys, and I'd just like your thoughts on it, that, you know, you're just a couple of guys who got concerned about the issue and you took it upon yourselves to make it happen, and all of a sudden it turns into a provincial program. It really says something about how anybody in the province can become a champion of safety, and safety in the workplace and safety at home.
Well, we agree. ultimately, all parents want their children to be successful in life and be more successful than even ourselves, and go to work and come home safe. That's the bottom line.
And if you get those habits ingrained early, they live for a lifetime.
That's true, but if you take a look at where we need to go in the province now, I'm starting to jump a little bit ahead of maybe of where you want to be, but if we see where we need to go and you start looking at statistics, we've got a long ways to go yet.
Well, that's why we're doing this program. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. My guests have been Wayne Irwin and Lyle Jacobson. Come to us, they're sitting in our studios in Weyburn. I want to thank you both for taking the time to share this message with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, that concludes another edition of Zero. Stay with us as you'll hear how Terry Larson has turned to the literary arts to keep the memory of her father alive. She has written a poem that helps her cope with the loss that had turned her into one of Saskatchewan's most passionate safety champions.
Just west of our farm is a steel bridge. And the steel bridge always had a special place for me because it was really where I grew up. When we weren't working, we'd usually be done work by noon on Saturday, and then we'd have our afternoons to ourselves, and we'd jump on our motorcycles and we'd go down to the creek. We had a fort down there. We built rafts and rafted down the creek. It was the place where you can see our steel bin and our wooden bin from the bridge. It was where I had my first truck ride with my grandma hauling grain and be part of that. Just to recognize that I really come from that farming background. Not just the men in the family, the women in the family worked on the farm as well. And so to that be my place. My horses were in the pasture by the creek. It was a special place for me. So when I was missing Dad, that's where I'd go, is I would go to the steel bridge. And initially it hurt. You'd hear the wind and you'd hear the geese, and it just all reminded me of him. And I don't even remember when it was, but there came a point when those sounds, they became a comfort to me. So now when I need to see Dad, I don't go to his grave in Rollo. I go that extra 2 miles south of the graveyard, and I go to the steel bin, and I go to the steel bridge. And that's my place where I can connect with Daddy. I stood at the bridge and cried out your name. I waited and waited, but no one came. Tears fell in the creek below as I longed for you, Dad, the man I loved so. Above, a goose called down to me, and a gentle wind kissed my cheek. Wrapped in the scent of soil warmed by sun, comforted by the willows that sighed, "Oh, hun." I see now you were there with me, in the wind, steel bin, all the sounds of the creek. You were the goose and the smell of the land, the sigh of the willows, blade of grass in my hand. Today on the bridge, I called out your name. I waited, then smiled, so glad that you came.